Well, I suppose we better get started. I don't know if anyone else is going to join us. If they do, they can jump in. Looks like it's just you and me this morning, Coralie. We're staying in listen only mode. But you never know. We might get some latecomers.
Yeah.
You were listening to it on audio, as I recall. Is that right? So do you know where you're up to, or?
I don't know what chapter I'm up to, because if it says I missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay.
you know, sort of a lot of the theme is shame.
Yes.
But so where was I up to? She was talking about she had just remembered when she was in a car trip with her family, and she catastrophizing. That's what she was talking
okay. So you've gone a bit further ahead. That's all right. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, that was, I remember that story. It was a very good one. All right, so just for the benefit of the recording, we are working our way through Brené Brown's awesome book, Daring Greatly, and subtitle, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. And so we won't do a great recap, because if you want to recap, you can watch the previous recordings. I will just mention where the name Daring Greatly came from. So that was what inspired Brené to write the book, was the quote, "The man in the arena," which was the famous speech by Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt as he was known, way back at the Sorbonne, the Paris Institute or University, and it was a speech that he gave, which has now come to be known as the Man in the Arena speech. The actual speech was called Citizenship in a Republic, but this was from 1910. It's amazing how words can have power and can last through generations, isn't it? So I'll just reread that quickly. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. That is actually also my favorite speech. If somebody says to me, what is your most favorite, the quote that stands out for you the most, that is actually the one for me as well. And I put that in my own book, at the start of my own book, unaware that Brené was also using it at the same time. So when did I write my book? Back in 2013. So and when did she write this one? Oh, 2012 incorporated. So she might have pipped me to it. But I didn't know about Brené Brown at the time, so we're obviously thinking along the same lines there. Anyway, that's what it means to dare greatly, as to put yourself out there in the arena of life, and to risk, to be vulnerable, to have the courage to step forward and risk being judged, or risk being embarrassed, humiliated, perhaps, certainly risking people disagreeing with your opinions. And the key message, I think, from a starting point there was, if you are not willing to risk not being perfect, not being bulletproof, then you won't push yourself on to achieve things. You have to step out there in any walk of life. If you want to progress, you have to risk failing or having setbacks. So that led on to her introduction, which was about her adventures in the arena, and it starts off with a very amusing conversation with her therapist. and then she led on to what she defined as wholeheartedness, wholehearted living, which was mainly really work that she'd already done in the gifts of imperfection, but it was really reinforcing this point that we need to develop the ability to trust in ourselves, I suppose, and let go of that fear of failure and let go of the things that are holding us back. There's a lot to do with conquering this underlying theme that a lot of us have of, at times, the imposter syndrome, or thinking I may not be worthy, I may not be good enough at whatever it is we're trying to do. You know, whether it's making costumes or playing in a band or giving a speech, whatever it might be that you're trying to do, there's that underlying fear that, what if I'm not good enough? And Seth Godin says he encourages all to put our art out there, whatever your art is, your personal skill set, and be willing to live with the tension that this may work, but it also may not work, or it may not be received by other people as well as we'd hope. And does that really matter? I mean, if we're doing it for ourselves to start with, does it matter if someone else thinks it's not good enough? That's just their opinion. So Brené went famous when she did the big TED talk, and it went viral, and then she appeared on the Oprah Winfrey show. I think being interviewed by Oprah immediately puts you on the worldwide map of people of interest, doesn't it? And then she talks in chapter 1 about scarcity, so I'm not going to go in depth into it. But this culture of that we're in a world today where we're under a barrage of over information. We're getting bombarded with social media, with news media, pushing headlines at us, giving us sound bites all the time, triggering some of those aspects in us that make us think, well, I'm not good enough, particularly with regard to consumerism. If you haven't got the latest job, car, house, boat, whatever, you're not keeping up with the Joneses, as they say. Whoever the Joneses are, I've met some Joneses. I've got to know a few people called Jones over my time. But if we're not keeping up with them, maybe we're not good enough. So reinforcing that underlying what I love this, what this one lady, Lynn Twist, called the great lie, where your first waking thought of the day is, I haven't had enough sleep, and you go on to, I haven't been good enough in my job, and I haven't. I'm already losing. I'm already inadequate before you even get out of bed. So we've got this sort of scarcity mindset, and that in business, for instance, that there's not enough customers to go around, so we might not be good enough to attract those customers. You know, somebody else is going to get them. Somebody else will get the deal. And what does that lead to? It leads to things like shame, comparison, disengagement, and sort of national conversation about, you know, we need to be afraid of something all the time. There's always a plague or a war or a flood or a fire or something going on, or this impending doom kind of thing, potentially an worldwide economic crash, petrol prices going up, cost of living going up. We're bombarded with it all the time. So what we covered last week was chapter 2, debunking the vulnerability myths, and that the theory that, or the sort of entrenched upbringing that a lot of us have had, of that vulnerability is weakness. Particularly, I think, there, as Brené goes on to talk about, there's pressure on both genders, or all genders, whatever the other genders are these days. That's, you know, big boys don't cry, big girls don't cry either. You know, get your big girl pants on, and all that kind of statement that you hear out there, because we don't like vulnerability. Although we respect it in other people. When we see somebody get up on stage and make a speech or something, we think, oh, good on them, you know, that must be courageous to get up and do that. But we don't like it in ourselves. We don't like being perceived as being vulnerable, do we? So all the things that we want in life, when we want to be creative or to improve our life or to grow in some way, they require us to be vulnerable. They require us to step out there into the spotlight. Anyway, that's sort of where we were up to, I think. Is there anything else that you think that you can remember, Coralie, that you wanted to highlight in those chapters so far before we move on to shame?
One thing that I did notice, particularly from your talking last week, was that she quite often came up with like a group of 3 words. There was like love, belonging, connection, courage, compassion, connection. Always in the group of 3 words, always one of them was connection.
Yes. What did you make of that?
I just agreed with it.
Well done. So you connected with her. No, you're absolutely spot on. I think that's an underpinning philosophy of hers, that human beings not only thrive on connection, we need connection. And isn't that why one of the greatest kind of tortures or punishments, if you like, is to put someone in solitary confinement, because if that way they can't connect with anybody, and without anyone to bounce conversation with or ideas with or get some sort of feedback from, you just living inside your own head. And they do say that it sort of drives people a bit crazy when they're in solitary confinement. And there must be something in that, because countless movies show it as a punishment technique or a torture technique, or, you know, prisoners of war and all that. If you're thrown into solitary confinement, you go a bit crazy.
Yeah.
And yet there's a lot of people who appear to be living in the public arena. You can be surrounded by people and yet feel totally alone. You can feel as if you're in solitary confinement if there's no actual connection going on. So to feel disconnected or disengaged is quite a nasty one, really. It can have a big impact on our mental health. Sometimes you become more aware of it when you are surrounded by people. I don't belong with any of these people. I don't fit in, or I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Number 2 on now, and we drive up on it.
Oh, I think that stands not muted. Hang on, I'll fix that.
I wasn't talking to us.
No, I don't think so.
He's saying something profound.
I didn't. Did you think it was talking to us?
I was. It just sounded muffled. I thought he might be.
Okay. Well, he did say he was in me listen only mode this morning because he's working on something. So, all right. So we'll come to chapter 3, which is understanding and combating shame. And it's a big chapter. And I love the that also known as Gremlin Ninja Warrior training. Combating shame. So shame derives its power from being unspeakable. And if we speak about it, as she says, we cut it off at the knees. Shame hates having words wrapped around it. That's the thing about shame. It's something you want to keep to yourself. You want to keep it private because you're ashamed, because you're embarrassed, because you think, oh, I stuffed up there, I shouldn't have done that, or I've done the wrong thing, or I could have done something and I didn't. So there's all these different aspects. I love this when she goes, vulnerability and shame in one book. Are you trying to kill us? Very good. So she told the story about being approached by a gentleman after one of her speeches, and saying that was, oh, so this brought to light for her that all her work up till then had been working with women or interviewing women, and it hadn't occurred to her that men have their own version of the same issues going on, and that maybe we react slightly differently, or we camouflage things differently, but everyone experiences shame at some point. So for instance, she talks about when you produce something, you produce some art, or you've written something, or you've made some artwork, or you've done, I don't know, written a song or something like that. When you put it out there in the arena, if you tie your own self-esteem or self-worth to how that work is received, you could be setting yourself up for a big problem. Because in today's world, we know you cannot please all the people all the time. So as soon as you put your work out there, someone's going to slag it off or disagree with it, or think you're an idiot for writing it, or completely contradict your opinion. And if your self-esteem is based on how that work is received, rather than on who you are, and not being dependent on how that work is received, you could be setting yourself up for failure. Because this is where the shame gremlin, as she talks about, attacks you, the little voice in your head that comes in and says you shouldn't have done that. But not only that, you were wrong to even try. And that's where people can go back inside their shell and give up. They stop writing their art, or they stop writing their songs, or they stop drawing their pictures, or whatever it is, because shame tells them that they're not good enough, and they should have known better in the first place than to even try to put themselves out there. And then you become, oh, and she said, if your work is received well, you're actually even more trouble. And when she said that, I was sort of going, what do you mean? And it was because, again, you've handed your self-worth over to what other people think.
Yeah. She
said it's like Hotel California now. You're officially a prisoner of pleasing, performing, and perfecting. You can check out. You can check in, but you can never leave. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Yeah. Was that actually how the song went, wasn't it? So the key thing is not about what you do or the work that you produce. It's about who you are. And she says, and I've highlighted this in orange, so we know this is a key point, regardless of the outcome, you've already dared greatly, and that's totally aligned with your values, with who you want to be. So, as she says, the whole framework of the book is about being in the arena, being out there in the world, and putting your work out there, or putting your ideas out there. And that means to risk failure. So that's where the courage is required. That's the daring greatly part of it. She quotes a gentleman called Peter Sheehan, who's an author, speaker, and CEO of Change Labs. The secret killer of innovation is shame. You can't measure it, but it is there. Killer of innovation. So shame stunts creativity. It makes you think that you're not good enough, so you don't risk anything. So you keep your talent to yourself. You don't want to share it with the world in case you get ridiculed or criticized. She says her good friend and colleague Robert Hilliker says, shame started as a two-person experience, but as I got older, I learned how to do shame all by myself. Sometimes when we dare to walk into the arena, the greatest critic we face is ourselves. So we don't even need somebody else to tell us that wasn't good enough. We start doubting it ourselves. So how do we combat that? Well, a thing that she calls shame resilience. The ability to say, this hurts. This is disappointing, maybe even devastating, but success and recognition and approval are not the values that drive me. My value is courage, and I was just courageous. So you can move on, shame. So personalize it. You talk to the shame voice that pops into your head as, give it a name, or call it, even just call it shame. Tell it where to go. Say, well, you might be having a go at me, telling me I'm not good enough, but go away. Leave me alone. And then she goes on to define what is shame and why is it so hard to talk about it. First, shame is the fear of disconnection. It's the fear that something we've done or failed to do, an ideal that we've not lived up to, or a goal that we've not accomplished makes us unworthy of connection. I'm not worthy or good enough for love, belonging, or connection. Again, three things. You said she puts things into threes. Love, belonging, or connection. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Have you ever experienced that, where you've been in a public environment, or you've walked into a room and you think, I don't really belong here, these are not my people, or this is not the right party to be at, or go to a business function or something, a networking meeting, and think, oh, I don't know if I really belong with these people.
Yeah.
Ever experienced that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And also, you know, there's just like not doing stuff because of that, because that might happen. Because, you know, being with myself with shame, it's like, you know, not walk into that situation because that might happen.
Yeah. That's even worse, isn't it? Because
yeah.
Have you had what I found, certainly the opposite, is where that voice is speaking to you. You go, oh, I don't know if I really want to go to that thing, because what if I don't get on with the people? I don't really fit in. But then you go anyway, and then you realize that you actually meet some really cool people. You have some great conversations, and you're like, oh, I nearly didn't come to this. I was thinking I wasn't going to fit in, and then you actually meet some of the really cool people and have a great time. Then you feel like an idiot for thinking even thinking that I shouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
So she comes up with 12 shame categories that have come out of her research. Appearance and body image. That's a massive one for a lot of people, isn't it? No, we're never happy with our bodies. You're either too fat, too thin, too old, not fit enough. You know, we're always criticizing ourselves.
I know. That is actually, I do find that so mental, because like, you know, you go, my legs are too fat. They work, you know, if they get you everywhere,
Exactly.
you should be grateful to them and for them than you know, judging how they look. It's so dumb.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I'm aware I've got bandages on at the moment because I've just had some skin cancers cut out, and you know, you think, well, it has popped into my head that I go out into a restaurant or something, and people are gonna be sitting there going, "Oh, he looks like he's been in a fight. What's he been up to?" You know, and then are they judging you, thinking, "Well, he's a troublemaker because he's obviously been in a fight." And it's a fight with a surgeon's knife in this case. You know, it was a perfectly legitimate situation. I hadn't done anything wrong. Well, the only thing I did wrong was go out in the sun without enough protection on, but it wouldn't have mattered. Apparently, I've got the genetic predisposition towards skin damage from the solar rays, and it's a cumulative thing over a whole lifetime. So, but yeah, you can worry about what people think, or you just go, I don't care. I'm me. If they want to ask me about it, they can ask me about it, and I'll tell them what happened. Or you know, there's no shame in it. You see someone with a black eye, what's the first thing you think? I've been in a fight. She's been in a fight. Well, I wonder if her boyfriend hit her. You know, there's all those sorts of stigmas that go with those sorts of things. My stepson Troy, who suffers from epilepsy, and also I should put that differently, shouldn't I? He lives with epilepsy, but he sometimes will be staggering a bit because his balance is affected, and then you think, oh, I bet people must think he's drunk.
Yeah.
Young guy, stumbling around. you know, having to hold on to things to get from one place to the next, holding on to a chair or something as he goes through the bar, people be thinking, oh, he's had one too many.
Yeah.
You know,
They
people
do.
do make these assumptions.
Yeah.
But like you said, if your legs get you from A to B, which is what they're designed to do, you know, why do we worry so much about what they look like or what people will think if we've got a bit of cellulite or, you know,
Yeah.
extra fat or whatever? Well, it's more to do with what we think of ourselves. Most people don't even care. They're thinking about their own issues. They're not thinking about yours.
Absolutely.
Other shame categories: money and work. It's a big one, isn't it? Do I, you know, oh, I'm not earning enough money. Well, what if the group that I'm in this social situation think, you know, what's he doing here because he hasn't got enough money to be in our group, you know? Or work. It was there's not so much of a class system in Australia, or not that I'm aware of, whereas in the UK, very much so. You wouldn't see a surgeon sitting at a barbecue chatting to a guy who empties the rubbish bins, probably. Whereas here, you just take people as that's what they do. It doesn't make them any better or worse than you. It's just what they do for a living. Or maybe I'm being naive there. I don't know.
I know, I think that it's like that here too. But I find for myself that people like me to be busy. I find I get more positive reaction from people if I'm busy than if I'm not. Then it's like, oh, so now what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, the first question we ask people, isn't it, is what do you do for a living?
Yes.
You say nothing.
I'm enjoying life.
Yeah, it's funny. People do react to job titles and their sort of imagining of what they think. They're trying to put you in pigeonholes.
Yeah, but I don't know what anyone does anyway. People who work in offices, they tell me what they do, and I just don't. I don't see what they do all day. I don't get it at all.
But really, what's more important is who they are. But you don't lead a conversation with. You meet someone at the party, you don't go, so who are you? Well, you might, but you're not sort of, you're not like, oh, tell me your life story.
What are your values?
Yeah. How do you deal with shame? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Motherhood, fatherhood, again, potential for I haven't been a good enough parent, or feeling that other people might be judging you as not being a good enough parent.
I also thought when she was talking about some of this sort of stuff that it's quite American.
Oh,
and I don't think that we have all of the same stuff here as they have there, because they have all their, you know, football teams and stuff, that it's all very quite elitist sort of stuff.
are you thinking about the story where she didn't get into the cheerleaders squad? Have you come across that?
I'm not sure if I've even got to that story.
Okay, I might not be even in this book. It might
like,
be another, because I've read a few of her books now, so they're kind of merging.
Yeah,
but that was a big one where she didn't get into being a cheerleader, and she felt absolutely shamed because her family all expected that she would get in the team, and then she didn't, and she was devastated. And the parents gave her a hard time. Well, they didn't even talk to her about it. They just kind of, oh well, that's disappointing, you know. So she felt, because she'd failed to get into the cheerleader squad, that she was unworthy, and it had a big impact on her psychologically as she was growing up. So that's one of the things, parents can so unwittingly cause trauma in their children by what they either say or don't say at key moments in our life. And like I say, very often it's an unwitting mistake, a throwaway line that could have a long-term impact we don't even realize. So family, parenting, that covers those things as well. Mental and physical health. Yeah, shame category, like I said, my stepson, if he's stumbling around, people are judging that or coming up with ideas about what they think is going on. Addiction, sex, aging, religion, surviving trauma, being stereotyped or labeled. And these days, mud sticks. You know, if you make an accusation or somebody is accused of something on Facebook or something, or a social media platform, it could get twisted. Everything can get twisted so easily. You know, oh, Annie says she's trying to get in. Oh, she hasn't got the Zoom chat. Just trying to think what my code is. See if I can quickly figure that one out. Bear with me 1 second while I just sort that one out. Firstly, I've got to find creating your ideal life. Here we go. Sorry, I normally rely on Stan's my expert who normally gives people these sorts of things if I forget. Annie's new to our group. She came along last week.
Right, yeah.
There you go. Just sent her the code, so she may join us. I will pause the recording for that little bit, that little interlude there. Okay. Yeah, so we've got those shame categories. But here she said these are the kinds of responses that we received when we asked people for an example of shame. And so there was things like shame at being annoyed at raging at your kids, shame your boss calling you an idiot in front of a client or in front of other staff. Shame is not making partner, or shame is flunking out of school. There's so many different things. Getting fired, you know, or being laid off, being made redundant. You hear these stories about people that have lost their job and they don't tell the family. They carry on getting up, getting dressed and going off as if they're going to work because they're too ashamed to tell anyone that they've lost their job. It's quite scary, isn't it? You see that in quite a lot of movies and things as well. So shame can be real pain. And she says the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is where I did something bad, you know, and I'm sort of embarrassed about that, or I feel guilty for that. But shame is where I am bad. So the difference between I did something bad and I am bad. And that's why as a parent, if you're going to criticize your children, or as a boss, if you're going to criticize your staff, you focus on the behavior, not the person. So, you know, you're a good person. What I want to address with you is what you did here in this particular situation. You've done this. What would have been better was if you could do this, this, and this. And so you educate people about what they need to do to make it right, or to achieve the standard, or to get the job done right, rather than about them being an idiot or you know, they're a failure because they didn't do it the way it's supposed to be done. And yet it's so easy to sort of lash out, especially if you're angry at what somebody's done, or it's cost you money. If you're the boss and it's cost you money, oh, you idiot, what did you do that for? No, you know, that's cost me money. It's very easy to fall into that trap of really labeling somebody in some way rather than focusing on the behavior and training them to how to do it properly so that the mistake doesn't occur again. We're all human. We all make mistakes. There's no perfect being among us that I know of. Well, there's not many of us left anyway. Shame corrodes the very part of us that believes that we can change and do better. Oh, this is an interesting one I picked up on. Donald Klein, as somebody she's quoted here, captures the difference between shame and humiliation when he writes, people believe they deserve their shame they do not believe they deserve their humiliation. So if they've messed up, most people know when they've messed up. If you, especially at work, if you've done something wrong, you're like, oh damn it, I've undercharged the customer, or I've got this measurement wrong, or one of those sorts of things. You've stuffed up. You're not proud of it. You go, oh, I've got to get it right next time. And if your boss says, oh, what did you do that for? That's wrong. You go like, no, I'm ashamed. I admit it. I've stuffed up there. I shouldn't have done that. But if they call you out in front of the whole team and go, oh, Tony was an idiot this morning. He did this and he shouldn't have done it. And then the shame turns to humiliation, which then is, hang on, that's not fair. What are you picking on me for? Everyone else makes mistakes too. So powerful the impact of our communications and our interactions with people. So this thing that she uses to combat it is what she calls shame resilience. It's about moving from shame to empathy, which she calls the real antidote to shame. If we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. And then, this blows your theory, Coralie, because you said everything always comes in threes. She goes, there are 4 elements of shame resilience. I hope you don't feel ashamed, because you have no reason to.
Humiliating me.
All right, we're gonna have a bit of a laugh, haven't we, on some of these things? These are deep topics. So shame resilience: 1, recognizing shame and understanding its triggers. 2, practicing critical awareness. 3, reaching out. And 4, speaking shame. So when you acknowledge it, if you say, oh, I feel ashamed, I've done this wrong, if people respond then with, oh, don't feel bad, it's okay because I've made mistakes too. And when someone responds in that kind of manner, it goes away, doesn't it? Diffuses it. But if they go, no, you should be ashamed, you're a disgrace. I'm going to put it on the news that you stuffed up. That's not so good. Well, why is that? Why does that happen? Because the pain of shame, she says, is enough to trigger that survival part of our brain that runs, hides, or comes out swinging. So when we feel it's unfair, we feel like we're being attacked unfairly and we have to defend ourselves. So how do we do that? We go crazy. We get angry. We shout back at people. We do things we shouldn't do. We don't necessarily react the best way. Oh, Annie's joining us. Here we go. She must have found the message I sent her with the link in it. And we have Annie joining us. Dun, dun, dun. Connecting to audio. Here she comes. So welcome, Annie, to the chat. At the moment, we have standing listen only mode, and we have Coralie from New Zealand and myself. So welcome aboard and feel free to chip in. So we're working our way through understanding and combating shame, which is chapter 3 of Daring Greatly. Oh, we've gone back to 3 things again here, Coralie. According to Dr. Hartling, in order to deal with shame, some of us move away by withdrawing, hiding, silencing ourselves, keeping secrets. Some of us move toward, the second thing, by seeking to appease and please. And some of us move against by trying to gain power over others, by being aggressive and by using shame to fight shame, like sending really mean emails, for example. So there's 3 things. You were right. It comes in 3s. So how has she moved, and how did she set the commitment to set boundaries, and where did that come from, that she could move from wholeheartedness, from what will people think, to I am enough? Move towards wholeheartedness, I should say. Making the journey from what will people think to I am enough, I am good enough. Hi, Annie, we can see you now. So these gremlins, these shame gremlins, as she calls them, start whispering things like, well, you do suck, and how could you be so stupid? She said they always know exactly what to say. It's that little voice of our ego, isn't it? And where's that coming from? It's really underlying it all. It's trying to keep us safe. It's trying to make us avoid making the same mistake again. Avoid putting ourselves out there and open to criticism. So if it manages to convince you, oh, you're an idiot, you shouldn't have done that, don't step out like that again. Don't put your hand up in the meeting and voice your opinion, because you've done it before and now you've proven yourself to be an idiot. So just keep quiet, then you'll be safe. It's that underpinning thing of keeping you safe. And so you hide your genius, you hide your opinion, you don't speak up, you don't rise greatly and dare to be different, dare to voice your opinions, dare to put your artwork out there. Powerful stuff. So she says you get a shame attack. So how do you fix it? Oh, there's another three things again. Carly's pointed out to me that all these things come in threes, but we did have one that was in four. So one was practice courage and reach out. 2, talk to myself the way I would talk to someone I really love. And 3, own the story. That number 2, how the things we say to ourselves inside our own head when we're criticizing ourselves, you would not say to somebody else. You certainly wouldn't say it to your best friend. So why not start by being your best friend to yourself, and go easier on yourself, and not give yourself such a hard time, because you wouldn't do that to a good friend. You would try to support and encourage them, and yet we put ourselves down. Own the story. This is a key one. As I said, most people know when they've stuffed up, but rather than trying to deflect it, blame other people or blame circumstances, or, oh, I wasn't given the tools or the resources to do the job properly. If you know you've stuffed up, just go, yeah, I'm sorry, I stuffed up. It really diffuses it then particularly in a work situation, if you've got a boss who's having a go at you and you're going, no, it's my fault, I stuffed up. Like, they can't really carry on having a go at you then, can they? But if you're defending it, going, oh, was it me? No, look, if that guy hadn't have come in and hadn't done this, it wouldn't have meant I wouldn't have done that. It's like, no, you're just trying to blame somebody else. It's your fault. We have more respect for people that own up, don't we? When they just go, yep, it was me, I did it, I got it wrong, but I'll do better next time. Oh, okay, well, that's all I really want, isn't it? As a boss, you want people not to make the same mistake again. As a parent, you want your child not to make the same mistake again. You want them to learn from the experience. Yeah, I love this quote. Yeah, sorry, Carly.
If you fess up, other people will make excuses for you.
Yeah. Yeah, even the boss that's having a go at you sometimes. Oh, well, look, I know it wasn't really your fault, but don't do it again.
I find that often, but then that's that empathy thing too, isn't it? That they're giving you empathy if you
yes
out there.
Yeah, I think, well, there are horrible bosses out there, but most of us don't really like having a go at somebody. We'd rather just go, look, what they want is for you to not make the mistake again, especially if you're the owner of a small business and the staff member's just done something that's cost you money. They got it wrong and made a mistake and it's cost you money, then you want to make sure that doesn't happen again. But you're not really, unless you're one of those people who wants to destroy people, or you're having such a bad time or going through your own traumas that you're taking it out on everybody else. And there are those bosses out there, of course, but most of us just want an improved result, an improved situation. We want people to learn from their mistakes. So she says empathy is connection. It's a ladder out of the shame hole. I thought that was a good quote. She said empathy is a strange and powerful thing. There is no script. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. So when you share your own example of, look, you've messed this up, but I did it too. I've done that same mistake. So just learn from it, move on. This is how you do it next time.
Oh.
And you make people feel better that they're not the only ones who's made the mistake. You know, you have too, or other people have too. Then you don't feel like you're not humiliated. You're not ground into the, you know, pushed, squashed into the ground because someone's really having a go at you, putting you down. I found this very interesting, which talks a bit about trauma, that the research team with trauma survivors, she found the act of not discussing a traumatic event or confiding it to another person could be more damaging than the actual event. Now that's powerful, isn't it? So bottling it up and trying to process it and deal with it on your own is harder and potentially more damaging than if you share it. Now, it doesn't mean overshare. It doesn't mean you meet somebody at the bus stop and start immediately telling them your life story, or you lead with, you know, well, did you know that I completely stuffed my whole life up to this point, and you know, and it's my fault, and I'm, you know, that wouldn't be a good conversation starter, would it? So people have to be in a situation where they've earned your trust, or you believe that they're in a position where they can handle the truth. You know, that old saying, you can't handle the truth. You know, that the load isn't going to be too great for them to bear, to hear the story of what's happened. But she said when people shared their stories and experiences, their physical health improved, their doctor's visits decreased, and they showed significant decreases in their stress hormones. So the act of sharing the story of the trauma diffuses it. It heals. And then she said also studies are focused on the value of writing about it as a way of healing. The evidence is mounting. The act of writing about traumatic experience for as little as 15 or 20 minutes a day for 3 or 4 days can produce measurable changes in physical and mental health. Emotional writing can also affect people's sleep habits, work efficiency, and how they connect with others. I've definitely found that if there's something that's troubling me and I write about it, I get it out of my head and onto paper, it doesn't seem that big a problem anymore. You know, it diffuses it. It gives you, it compartmentalizes it in some way rather than taking over the whole of your mind and worrying about it, stressing about it. It means you can just sort of put it down as one of the many things out there in the world that you have to deal with, I suppose. See how we go. Still got a chunk of this chapter to go. It's a big topic, this shame issue. She talks about women, she calls it a web, right? The web of getting trapped in the web, and you can't, you know, you're stuck on the web, you can't get out. She asked women to share their definitions or experiences of shame, and a lot of it was look perfect, do perfect, be perfect, being judged by other mothers as, you know, you're not a good enough parent, being exposed, not feeling good enough, not feeling never enough at home, never enough at work, never enough in bed, never enough with my parents. Shame is never enough. No seat at the cool table. The pretty girls are all laughing, and I'm stuck here with all the ugly gremlins. I don't know. It's she says the primary trigger for women in terms of its power and universality is the first one: how we look, body image. Like you said, if your legs work and get you from A to B, does it matter if they're a bit chunky? It's you know, it's how we think of ourselves as not being perfect enough. What else? Oh, and also I thought this was interesting, that not only have you got to be perfect as a woman, you've also got to make it look as if it's easy. Yeah. Did you relate to that?
Oh yeah, because it just, as soon as she said that, it just made me think of like natural looking makeup.
Yeah.
You know, and like dyeing your hair so you don't look like you're going grey and all that.
I'm not worrying about that. I'm just letting my beard go a bit grey. I think it adds wisdom, you know, it sort of shows I've been around a bit longer.
Yeah.
But I think guys don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah.
Certainly not. I mean, we still do, because we all want the flat stomach, and you know, we want to look fit. You know, people could go, oh, look at that fat bugger. There is still that, but it's
But
not
there's
as, we're not judged
wearing
as much.
shoes. You know, that's a crime, really. Should
Sorry,
be
say that again.
wearing comfortable shoes. That's unfeminine.
Yeah, you're supposed to strut around in high heels, and where
Mm.
did that come from? That was making your legs look, accentuating your calf muscles, making you look sexier or something. That must have been invented by men. A man must have invented high heel shoes, surely.
Well, yeah, because it's a bit like, you know, the old Chinese feet binding thing. I
Yeah,
find it really cringy.
yeah. There's been some horrible stuff throughout history, hasn't there?
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting. Not only do you have to be perfect, you have to look like it just comes naturally to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
She says basically we have to be willing to stay as small, sweet, and quiet as possible, and use our time and talent to look pretty. Our dreams, ambitions, and gifts are unimportant. Wow. Even in today's world, with all the talk of equality and equal opportunities, and is that
Yeah,
still?
well, we've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
So this was written in, what did I say, 2012.
Mm.
Do you think that's changed in that 10-year period, or is it still the case?
I think it's I think it just takes a long time.
Well, we know certainly, I mean, it's being highlighted with the World Cup being in Qatar at the moment, that there's still a lot of issues in some countries.
Yes.
Where women are still not treated as equals. They're treated as third world or third class citizens.
Mm.
There's some horrible stuff still going on out there in the world. All right, how do men experience shame then? Shame is failure, being wrong, being defective, or having a sense of that, being soft, revealing any weakness, being criticized, a worse fear of being criticized, ridiculed. Either one of these is extremely shaming. Basically, men live under the pressure of one unrelenting message: do not be perceived as weak. So there's women who are supposed to be perfect but make it look easy. And guys, what's the shame message? The main answer was, and she apologizes for using this, but don't be a pussy. This was the word that came up most in the responses from people. Don't be soft, don't be weak. And then she told a story about the boy who was a great artist, and then an uncle said to the father, "What, you're raising a faggot artist now?" Because he's got a picture on the fridge, you know. So he's judging him based on the fact that he was focused on art and being a little too girly instead of doing something more manly. And so the guy never drew another picture again. That's very sad, isn't it? So as she said, she feels, I hope he's reconnected with his art. I know it's a tremendous loss for him, and I'm equally positive that the world is missing out. You know, what if he painted the next great, amazing artwork, but he didn't because he was too ashamed to put his talent out there. This was interesting too, where she talks about women's expectation of men, that we ask them to be vulnerable, we beg them to let us in, and we plead with them to tell us when they're afraid. But the truth is that most women can't stomach it. They'll ask you to be vulnerable, but underneath it they're going, come on, pull it together, man up. What do you think of that as women? You can only think of women because you are women.
See, that's actually a bit confronting, and I just need to test it a bit.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about this these topics that Brené's tackled, and she's found this throughout her whole career. When she was giving public speeches, and she'd turn up to give a talk, and the people were like, "What, you're going to talk about that? Oh no, we don't want to talk about that." Can you just pick the good bits out of what you want to say, not the nasty stuff, because it's unpopular or uncomfortable to talk about those emotions, and yet we all feel them. We've all experienced shame, we've all experienced humiliation, we've all experienced embarrassment, fear. So men, there's a mixed message going on there, isn't there? Oh, you men need to open up. It's okay for men to cry, but do you really want to see a man cry? Or do you want him to man up and deal with it? Stop being a weakling. I mean, that's sort of how society perceives it, isn't it?
Yeah. And it also, I'm thinking, oh, it depends what it's about. And so then I've got to judge whether it's worthy, whether they're allowed to cry in that situation or not.
Yeah. So, because I find, and I don't know if this is as an old age thing, and not caring so much anymore what people think, but I know that there's some movies that I'll say to Joe, oh, I think I might have a bit of dust in my eye there. Because we're all affected by emotional triggers, and you see the sad story on the movie, and you feel the empathy for that character.
Yeah.
And you also think, well, what if I was in that situation? How awful would that be? Losing a child or something, or your partner dying or something like that. You see it in a movie, and it affects you. But then, as a man, you're not really supposed to show that, are you?
Oh, see, that's all right.
Oh, that's okay. So that gets the Coralie tick of approval. It's all right for a man to have a bit of dust in his eye watching a movie, but not to break down sobbing and fall to the floor and bang the carpet and I can't cope with it anymore. I can't deal with the emotion of this situation. That would be over the top.
Yeah.
So there's degrees of men showing their feelings. There's an acceptable degree, and then there's a too far. All right.
But it's ingrained though, so I wouldn't be able to tell you where the cutoff is, because it's sort of just there.
So I'm just conscious of time. Coralie, how are you going? Are you all right for a minute or two yet?
Yeah.
Because we started a little bit late. We were waiting for a few people to join. Annie, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
We'll carry on for a minute because we did start late this morning. Well, we were here, Coralie and I. We started, but we were chit-chatting, weren't we, before we got into the topic? So, so then what she says here. I think this is really interesting. She's quoting one of her mentors on a conversation about men, shame, and vulnerability. Men know what women really want. They want us to pretend to be vulnerable. We get really good at pretending. Ooh. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I didn't
Men
like
pretend. I think it is deeply ingrained that men are, we're told as kids, oh, don't cry, get up, if you fall off your bike, you've got gravel rash on your knee or something and it hurts like hell, and it's like, no, stop crying, be a big boy, like, you're not allowed. So what happens now, I really related to this kind of situation where she talks about, I don't know, maybe a bit further on, how do men react to that shame? They either get pissed off or they shut down. So they either get angry, respond with anger, or they disengage. And she talks about, there's somewhere on here where she talks about her relationship with her husband. I'll come to that in a minute, maybe. Where was that? Come back to it. The solution to being stuck in shame is not to denigrate others stuck just like us, but to join hands and pull free together. If we're willing to dare greatly and risk vulnerability with each other, worthiness has the power to set us free. She talked about shame in sex was an interesting one. the discussion about a young woman in the class speaking up saying, we're never pretty or sexy or skinny enough for the guy, for our boyfriend or our husband. The discussion was mostly about how it's so scary to have sex with someone you care about when you're worried about how your body looks. So she said, went on to say, it's not easy to have sex and keep your stomach tucked in. How can we get into it when we're worried about our back fat or our love handles? And the guy responded with, well, we don't care about that. You know, that's a load of nonsense. Mate, you're making up stuff about what we're thinking as men. What we're really thinking is, do you love me? Do you care about me? Do you want me? Am I important to you? Am I good enough? That's what we're thinking. When it comes to sex, it feels like our life is on the line and you're worried about that crap. So interesting, different responses or different approaches to it from women to men. But I think that's also true with this body image thing is a big factor. If you don't feel like you look sexy, it erodes your confidence in feeling that you are sexy. And yet if the other person's there with you and willing to get into bed with you, they must find you sexy enough at least to make that effort. So why are we worried about it, you know? And yet we do, don't we? We all got those sort of concerns about whether we're enough. This was interesting that boys went from when boys are 8 to 10 years old, they learn that initiating sex is their responsibility and that sexual rejection soon becomes the hallmark of masculine shame. He explained, and this is a guy who's a therapist, and he said, even in my own life, when my wife isn't interested, I still have to feel battle feelings of shame. It doesn't matter if I intellectually understand why she's not in the mood. I'm vulnerable and it's very difficult. And then he said, this is what can lead to, he does work around addiction and pornography. And his answer was that for $5 and 5 minutes, you think you're getting what you need and you don't have to risk rejection. And so, yeah, this for Brené, this was a big kind of, wow, I didn't think about really how men were reacting to things. So common issues between men and women were body image, aging, appearance, money, parenting, motherhood, exhaustion, resentment, and fear. So how do you combat all that? How do you become wholehearted? Being honest, having loving conversations that require major vulnerability. We have to be able to talk about how we feel, what we need and desire. And we have to be able to listen with an open heart and an open mind. There is no intimacy without vulnerability. Yet another powerful example of vulnerability as courage. Now, here's the argument that I was coming to, that I really related to this, because it could have been Joe and me. When I talk to couples, I can see how shame creates one of the dynamics most lethal to a relationship. Women who feel shame when they don't feel heard or validated often resort to pushing and provoking with criticism. Why don't you ever do enough? Or you never get it right. Men in turn, who feel shame when they feel criticized for being inadequate, either shut down, which leads women to poke and provoke more, or come back with anger. We've had that. And she said where she's done this with her husband, Steve, where she'll have a go at him about something. He's like, leave me alone. That job you asked me to do 6 months ago, I'm getting around to it, you know. So she has another go at him. And in the end, he's like, just leave me alone, will you? And then he gets angry because he's feeling attacked and he has to defend himself.
Don't be worried. Please do not worry. There's nothing to worry about.
Sorry, Annie, did you say something there?
Nope, all good.
All good. Yeah, so the result was mutual desperation. Interesting. What did you think of that one?
Yeah.
Could be a conversation in your household.
Yeah. I think we do all the variations of that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that one?
I'm just enjoying listening at the moment.
Okay. Well, feel free to chip in if you want to add anything, or if I've missed anything, or you've got an experience or something. So she said, well, how did we sort of work it? She said he without a question, her husband is the best thing that's ever happened to her. And when we got married, neither of us had any idea what a good partnership looked like or what it took to make it work. If you asked us today what we believe is the key to our relationship, the answer would be vulnerability, love, humor, respect, shame-free fighting, and blame-free living.
Mm.
And they learned it through trial and error. So, that's the thing. You don't just suddenly have a perfect marriage. You have to work at it, don't you? But yeah, when you're open and honest, and also you can laugh at yourself and laugh at situations, and not treat the other person with disrespect, I suppose, is a key thing. Always respect them for whatever they're going through or whatever you're dealing with, because you're both dealing with different things. Interesting point. She said, we can apologize for shaming someone we love, but the truth is that those shaming comments leave marks. You can't take back the words you've said. And sometimes they can have you can go, well, I know intellectually that person only said that when they were angry and they lashed out, but what if that's what they really think all the time? And particularly if you're having a go at someone that, oh, you're useless, you're no good, you're not good enough, then they start going, is that what they really think of me? So it can be quite corrosive over time. That she says, even if we apologize, we've done serious damage because we've demonstrated our willingness to use sacred information as a weapon. So one to watch out for, to guard against. And this, I highlighted this in orange. Here we go. Key point. We can only love others as much as we love ourselves. So we mentioned that last week, that we don't look for someone to complete us, like the Jerry Maguire movie. We look for someone to enhance us or help us be a better version of ourselves. But we have to, the underlying thing is we have to love ourselves first, but we can love somebody else truly. So are we practicing love? Most of us are really good at professing it, sometimes 10 times a day, and keep telling someone I love you, I love you, I love you, but does it mean anything if you're not practicing it? So are we walking the talk? Are we being our most vulnerable selves? Are we showing trust, kindness, affection, and respect to our partners? It's not the lack of professing that gets us in trouble in our relationships. It's failing to practice love that leads to hurt. So, that old thing of who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you say.
Yeah.
Back it up with actions. Become real. All right. She mentions about having disdain for any group that insists on disdain towards other people. There was a sort of a culture about that with attitudes toward gay people, for example, or people with different racism or that sort of thing. So she said, I have no interest in joining a group that thrives on disdain for other people. What else?
Like
All right. Yep.
And be with some people that I love.
No worries. So the final quote I've got here for you today: if we're going to find our way out of shame and back to each other, vulnerability is the path and courage is the light. To set down those lists of what we're supposed to be is brave. To love ourselves and support each other in the process of becoming real is perhaps the greatest single act of daring greatly. There we go. That's the chapter on shame. Tough chapter. We'll go on to the vulnerability armor next week. Thank you, Carly. Is there anything else you wanted to add before you dash off?
No, thank you.
Thank you for your input, and it's been great talking to you this morning. Thanks for joining us, Annie, and thanks for Stan, even though he's only listen only mode, we've felt his presence. And have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Things to think about. Bye.